we're here with Elizabeth Bear, for those of you who weren't here from the beginning. And you have written an amazing amount of books in an amazing amount of different genres. But the series that I managed to scrounge up for here are your science fiction series.
Mm-hmm. I do see one lonely fantasy novel down there.
Is there?
There's by the mountain bound.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. You make a very tricky combination between science fiction and fantasy. Do you see any difference in writing the two?
I think they are different subgenres that use similar tools to engage creatively with the world. They're both literatures that rely a great deal on alienation for their impact. By which I mean, when you're writing a science fiction or a fantasy novel, one of the things you're doing is you're taking familiar things and making them strange, which allows you to look at them in new and different ways. Fantasy tends to use the numinous or magic or the inexplicable to do this. Science fiction, its borders are a little, I almost in some ways consider it a subgenre of fantasy, because while it's still a literature of the imagination, its borders are much tighter. And we try with certain things that have been grandfathered in to that literature of the fantastic, time travel, faster than light, certain types of psychic abilities, things which may or may not be possible, or probably aren't possible in some cases, are still considered science fictional because they've been in the genre since the beginning. But both genres use this concept of sense of wonder, of something that is bigger, engaging in something that is bigger than ourselves, whether it's the universe or the numinous, to create a world we can look at and see afresh.
Could you tell us a little bit about these ones? The first one of the series is called All the Windwracked Stars, and the second one is called By the Mountain Bound, and there is a third one only out in hardcover so far, called The Sea Thy Mistress.
Yes.
It's your most recently finished trilogy,
yes.
I think. And you said you considered the middle one a fantasy novel.
Well, I think they are all.
Could you tell us what they're about?
Yes. They are about, they draw their inspiration from Norse mythology, the Poetic Eddas specifically. The collective title for the series is the Edda of Burdens. And they draw their inspiration from the idea that after Ragnarok, there will be another world, which will arise anew. When the world of the gods ends, another world about which we know nothing will arise. And this series, I call it para-apocalyptic as opposed to post-apocalyptic. It's para-apocalyptic because the three books take place over the course of 3 separate apocalypses. So, and there's about a 2,000-year time span, and among them, the By the Mountain Bound, which was the one you pointed to, is very classical high fantasy with a Norse twist. You have gods and angels basically dueling for the future of the world in a cold, snowy, mountainous, Arctic environment, such as you might expect. The other 2 books, All the Windwracked Stars and The Sea Thy Mistress, are that same world 2,000 years in the future. So if you went from, say, 500 AD to about what you'd expect 2,500 AD to be like in technology levels. One of the things I hate is when fantasy universes are technologically static. They've been using that same broadsword technology for the last 5,000 years, and nobody has invented the arquebus yet. It bugs me. So,
yeah,
but since magic works in this world, their technology is somewhat based on runic magic, which seem to me the most technological of magics.
You have written another trilogy, which is recently finished as well, called Dust, Chill and Grey. This is another good example of how you mix fantasy with science fiction. Would you like to tell us about it?
Oh, it's these books, which I call the Jacob's Ladder series, are hard science fiction with certain fantasy trappings. I use certain tropes of fantasy, the quest narrative, the young person of secretly noble origins who must go on a quest and prove themselves. And there are, quote, angels and demons, which are actually various manifestations of this starship's artificial intelligence. One of my original ideas for this book was that you always have the generation ship narratives where they're on a crippled generation ship and don't know it. How do you not know it? We're very good at observing things as a species and putting together clues. And it's not like you don't tell your kids, by the way, we're on a generation ship, don't open that hatch. And here's why. So I was never very happy with that trope because it relies on people being extremely stupid. And this sort of platonic idea that the world was much better before and everything is on a downhill slide. So yes, they have a generation ship. It's in rough shape. They're trying to get it underway again because they're orbiting an unstable star. And there are still a lot of fantasy tropes involved, but everything that's going on has a very firm scientific basis. There's no magic in this universe. Where there appears to be telepathy, it's nanotechnology and artificial intelligence mediated communication, brain-to-brain texting, basically. Where there appear to be angels, they're technological constructs, and so forth. And so it's sort of the opposite, where in these books I've created a technological looking world that actually has magical underpinnings. I did the reverse in these, and that was completely unconscious on my part because I wrote them about 10 years apart. Oh. But they were published simultaneously in one of those great jokes of the publishing industry.
Yeah, because when they are published next to each other, it's very funny to read the take on fantasy with SF in it, and SF with fantasy in it.
Yes, and plot-wise, they do actually parallel each other quite a lot. They're similar plot. You know, everybody has their fallback plot tricks. And boy, it was really obvious to me when suddenly, like, well, I haven't used this trick in a while. Oh.
Ian got asked how he started. Do you have a story about that as well?
I was raised to be a science fiction writer.
Oh,
I'm a third generation science fiction fan on both sides of the family. On my dad's side, it was Jack Vance and Howard, the Conan books. And on my maternal grandfather was very fond of Asimov. And my mom had a real passion for the new wave, Delaney, Le Guin, Joanna Russ. So I really grew up steeped in the genre. I was reading Asimov and Joanna Russ at a ridiculously early age. If you want your children to grow up normal, don't give them Susie McKee Charna's books when they're in grade school.
So your family must be extremely proud to have you as the new wave.
Yeah, they're pretty chuffed. Neither of my grandfathers lived long enough to see me publish a book, but both of my parents, in their very different ways, are pretty happy with me.
Your first series I actually have here as well. Hammered, Scar Down, and World Wired. Oh, yes. I always get that wrong.
That's okay.
You started writing those as, I'm almost saying divine inspiration, even if I don't like the expression, because you wrote them on a very short time.
Well, not actually. I started writing Hammered when I wasn't a very good writer yet. I started, the first draft of Hammered is a 1,500 word, that's a novella, isn't it? At that point, it's like a very short novella, long novelette.
Is it 16 or 18?
I don't know. It's in there somewhere. It's a fat novelette, which is really incredibly bad, and which was rejected by everyone from Asimov Science Fiction magazine to you know, just basically every magazine in the industry rejected it. So I put it away, and I wrote for another 8 years or so, and having written these books and actually sent this one out to look for an agent, the agent who read it, the agent who requested it, because you send out a million queries, and one agent says, I think maybe I'd like to read that, and then you hope. She said, well, I don't think it's a good first novel. Do you have any straight science fiction? And I sort of rummaged around in the back of my drawers and said, well, I have this crappy idea, this good idea that I made a crappy execution of. I wonder if I can. And so when I rewrote it, I realized that it was actually 2 novels, and then I needed a 3rd novel to complete the story arc, which is the difference between an immature writer and a mature writer, I think. So.
So it was just happenstance that made you start writing for a living?
Yeah, well, it wasn't exactly happenstance. I've been trying for a long time. And this was right after 9/11, and it was very hard to find a job, and I'd been laid off. And I had taken my dogs to the park so often they were starting to get territorial and aggressive about it. And my tolerance for daytime television turns out to be pretty low. So I wrote a lot. I think I wrote about 500,000 words that year.
Yeah, that is a lot.
That is a lot.
You have written...
I'm sorry, but it was all ideas I'd been sitting on for a long time, so it was easy. Easy.
Yeah, I don't believe you when you say easy. You have said on both your live journal and your Twitter that it's good I'm superhuman. And the rest of us feels the same. She must be superhuman. And it's really, really good that she is. Otherwise we wouldn't have this amazing variety. You have written a fantasy series of 4 books as well, which we don't have present. And you have written a vampire series of 3 books.
Yeah, soon to be 4.
Soon to be 4, which we are very pleased about. The series is called New Amsterdam.
Yes, New Amsterdam. I wore my pin.
Team Don Sebastian. Don Sebastian is the major character and the vampire in the series, and it's truly good. If you find it, buy it, steal it, borrow it, copy it, do whatever you want, and contact her publishers to make them publish them again.
I decided I wanted to write a vampire Sherlock Holmes, and
you did. So, and from all of this, what are you going to do next? I mean, you don't repeat yourself.
No, I'm currently, I have a fat fantasy trilogy, totally traditional fantasy, except it's set in sort of not Central Asia instead of not medieval Europe, coming out from Tor starting in March. The first book is called Range of Ghosts, and I'm very excited about it. It's a lot of fun. There are magic ponies and evil sorcerers and lots of bow fights. And I'm trying to sell, actually stealing a match from Ian. I have a novella that's coming out in Asimov's probably sometime next year that, if I have any luck with it, will be the first 5th of a novel set in Bangalore, which is it's a police procedural set in Bangalore. Not quite as ambitious as River of Gods, more like Prime Suspect in Bangalore 2040. And I'm trying to sell, possibly under a pseudonym, because it's kind of a departure, a book that I'm, for marketing purposes, describing as jazz punk, which is Gotham, not New York City in the 1920s, with sort of super tech, comic book super tech. And they've put a masonry dome over the city, and it's all very, and it's very weird because I can slap a masonry dome over New York City with no problem at all, but then I start thinking about, but they haven't built the Empire State Building yet. And I'm like, okay, obviously they've got better technology than we do. They could be building the Empire State Building. A little bit ahead of, it's weird what your brain balks at. Yeah. But that one's great. It's got an annoying superhero, an annoying Deus Ex Machina superhero, and it's very inspired by Deborah Bloom's book, The Poisoner's Handbook, which is about the first forensic pathologist in the United States who he and his partner, a chemist, worked in New York City in the 1920s and 1930s, which of course was the era of prohibition and the gangs and the really corrupt political machine in New York City, at Tammany Hall. And it's fascinating stuff, and I'm like, I want to write a sort of science fantasy novel in a setting like this. So, as you can see, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I can see
That,
it.
if I sell that, it will probably come out under a pseudonym because it is very different. But the title, and we don't know what the pseudonym would be yet, but the title is Gotham Jazz. And
So we have to keep an eye
you have to
out
keep
for
an
that
eye out
one.
for that title, and I will mention it on my, I don't think they're gonna make me do a secret pseudonym,
Ah,
so,
very good. We want to find it.
yes.
Even if you've written in several different subgenres, you seem to stick to a lot of themes, of course, and a lot of meta, but you have certain themes and certain meta that you keep returning to. And one of the examples of this, I think, is Carnival, which is one of your agent stories.
Yes,
But
I read
setting-
a lot of spy stories because I like them.
Yeah. Could you tell us about Carnival as well?
Carnival is, well, remember when I said that I was reading Joanna Russ at probably an inappropriately young age? Carnival is my reaction as an adult woman to, not Joanna Russ, because she was never simple and one note, but to some of the other feminist utopias of the 1970s, where the theme seemed to be, if we can just get rid of the men, everything will be fine. And I know a lot of women. And we're perfectly capable of being jerks. So I didn't really believe in these utopian feminist collectives. And I wanted to write a book about that, but I also wanted to write a book about gender politics and racial politics and a bunch of other things. So Carnival is a book set in a quote-unquote feminist utopia when diplomats from outside, who happen to be a pair of gay men, because those are the outside, the other planet that is sending the diplomats is very patriarchal and oppressive towards women. And those were the only people they could find who they thought would be acceptable to the Amazons. And they're not really, but they're better than straight boys, a little, we guess. So it's kind of, there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of conversation in that book about colonialism and about gender expectations and gender roles and stuff.
And about relationships.
And about relationships, and
which
it has
is one of the recurring themes in your
yeah.
books.
I'm obsessed with relationships, not romances, but relationships.
The hard part,
Yeah,
not the easy part.
yeah.
Yeah, I can truly recommend Carnival as a starting point if you haven't read Elizabeth Bear before.
Thank you. It almost won the Philip K. Dick Award. Was the runner-up that year.
And that is one of the awards you haven't won yet.
Yep, I have not won that one.
2 Hugos and 1 Best New Writer.
One Campbell Award and a Sturgeon, of which I am very proud, which is a short story award.
And you're well worth both of them.
Oh, thank you.
I usually get questions. I write fantasy, and I get questions. Do you ever consider writing mainstream? Because that is like the cleaned up version of literature. Do you get those questions?
I have a mainstream, or at least a historical YA novel that wrote with Sarah Monette that I've been completely unable to sell. So, and you know, if I ever, when I have mainstream ideas, I will write them. I am very, however much like Ian, I'm very steeped in the science fictional school of finding ways to pick at the problem, and it's hard to walk away from. And sometimes I think it's hard to get mainstream readers to engage with a book that does that, even if it doesn't have aliens or what is it? Atwood's famous thing, squids from outer space. Even if it doesn't have any squids.
Talking squids in space.
Talking squids, yes, even if there are no talking squids in space. There's a science fictional mindset that I think you have to be willing to engage with it. You have to be willing to interrogate a text on a level that I think mystery enables and science fiction enables, and maybe mainstream literature, literary fiction, I should say, wants you to interrogate a text in a particular way in order to tease out the character's motives and emotional states. And actually I do some of that too. And science fiction is not always friendly to that particular structure of interrogation, which is why I think sometimes people tell me I'm incomprehensible. Because to the mainstream reader, there's all of this impenetrable science. It's like a pop quiz on science, and to your science fiction reader, it's like a pop quiz on emotions. And everybody walks away a little bit scarred.
You were nodding when Ian said that he has a good memory for something that he has seen, and that is a good resource for a writer. Is that true for you?
I have a terrible visual memory, as anybody who's watched me walking around Stockholm with a camera for the last 3 days can attest. But I have a really good tactile memory, and I use that. I had to learn to write visual description because I'm nearly blind, and you know, if you're beyond about that far away, you all look the same to me. So, but I'm, because of that, I'm I think very attuned to how things feel, since I spent a lot of my life looking for my glasses.
Do you have any advice for somebody writing?
Tell the truth, which is harder than it sounds. Because first you have to figure out what the truth is, and sometimes it isn't the easy thing that you kind of reflexively thought. But say what you mean, and even if it hurts, or even if it's scary.
I'd never be afraid.
Yeah, don't look down.
Yeah.
Kurosawa's advice, and I can't remember the exact phrasing of it, but what he said is, to be an artist is never to look away. And it's true.
And on that note, I think I will thank you. And
Thank
Ian as
you.
well.
And thank you.